When preparing print and web publications, how can you be sure they are written at a level that is appropriate for everyday citizens and residents of Maryland? After all, if it's too hard to read, citizens will lack confidence in themselves, and that's a big barrier to conservation action. If it's too hard to read, they'll ask you fewer questions, not more. They'll tune out quicker, and they'll forget sooner. That's where the Flesch-Kincaid Reading Ease Scale comes in. It's a tool you can use to measure how easy or difficult it is to read what you just wrote. It's actually a mathematical formula. Now don't worry, you don't have to memorize it. The computer will do it for you. But you do need to understand the basic principles. Long sentences are harder to read than short sentences. Long words are harder to read than short words. Passive sentences are harder to read than active sentences. If you need a refresher on the difference between active and passive voice, active and passive sentences, there's a link to a web page in the Optional Resources section of this lesson. On the Flesch-Kincaid scale, higher scores are easier to read. A score of 90 to 100 is suitable for all readers, including small children and those with very limited English skills. A score of 60 to 70 is comfortable reading for the average high school graduate. And a score of 0 to 30 is best reserved for your professional peers. And let's remember, here in the state of Maryland, less than 1/3 of the adults have graduated from a 4-year college, and that's higher than the national average. Let's compare some Flesch-Kincaid scores to some important benchmarks. On Flesch-Kincaid, a score of 65 is about comparable to an article in Reader's Digest. A score of 52 is about comparable to an article in Time magazine. The state of Florida requires insurance contracts to be written at 45 or higher to protect consumers from signing things they don't understand. And a score of 35 is comparable to an article in the Harvard Law Review. How do Maryland DNR materials stack up against these benchmarks? Well, shore erosion control, the natural approach, clocks in at 46, tough reading for a landowner with average reading skills. The brief description of the geology of Maryland clocks in at 38, tough reading for someone with college-level reading skills. And the Maryland Wildlife Diversity Conservation Plan clocks in at 26. Only your fellow professionals will read a publication written at this level. In preparing this course, I came across almost no DNR materials that are appropriate for Marylanders with average reading skills, almost none. Many are challenging even for college graduates, and quite a few could only be read by one of your conservation professional peers. So how do we use Flesch-Kincaid? It's built right into Microsoft Word. So you can use Flesch-Kincaid to test your writing before you release it to the public. Look for instructions in the quiz section of this lesson. Here are the takeaways for today's lesson. Confidence is key to conservation action, and you can use the Flesch-Kincaid scale to prepare materials that citizens will read with confidence. Write shorter sentences, write shorter words, and use active voice instead of passive voice, and you will achieve a higher Flesch-Kincaid scale. Higher meaning easier to read. Now that you've watched today's video, here are the next steps. First, take the quiz. It's required. Then join the forum. It's optional, but it's encouraged. Finally, review the optional reading and resources.